Last Sunday, I announced that Rabbi Robert Haas's wife, April, gave birth to a baby boy. Unfortunately, I mispronounced the child's name, and for the record, I want to be sure to get it right. His name is not pronounced, it's spelled A-R-I-A. It's not pronounced Aria, it's pronounced R-E-A. R-E-A. I know this because on Friday I went to the bris ceremony for R-E-A. In fact, sitting at the table with me was Harry and Sandy's daughter Margot, and Janet Wagner's husband Steve, and our good friend Jonathan Rabb. We had a wonderful table. A bris, B-R-I-S, is a Jewish ceremony held on the 8th day of an infant boy's life, in which during the ceremony the child is circumcised. And then everyone celebrates with a meal together. Needless to say, everyone had a great time except R.E.A. I don't blame him. He had every right to be upset and angry, which leads me to today's topic. One of the biggest challenges I have had in my life is controlling my temper, my anger. And some of my anger issues probably originated from the death of my father when I was a child, when I was 4. I'm sure there was a lot of suppressed anger that I couldn't recognize as a child and didn't know how to deal with. Another theory has to do with genetics. I didn't get to know my father or my father's father, that grandfather, but I understand that both of them could be moody and temperamental. And apparently we're not the only Hesters with this issue, because I've seen wives gather together at our family reunions, half joking and half commiserating about being married to a Hester man and his moods. It didn't help that while growing up, some of my role models were in occupations that were given permission to explode and be angry. Football was a huge part of my life from age 5 to 18. Most football coaches are not passive when they express themselves on the field or in the locker room. And one of my idols was a man named Vince Lombardi, a coach who could have scared the hell out of the devil. Lombardi wore his feelings on his sleeve. He was a football coach and Italian. Says it all. And he was very, very successful. He was known to be great. In fact, known to be the best. If Lombardi could be angry and explode, why couldn't I? I left the world of sports and entered the world of theater, where directors are also known for having temperamental outbursts. Almost every theatrical production I've been in, the director has blown a gasket somewhere in the rehearsal process, whether it's because cast members didn't know their lines, didn't know their blocking, or they weren't committed enough to the artistic process, or because something went wrong with the props, the costumes, or the lights. There's always something for an artistic director to be upset about. And so whether it was in the world of sports or in the world of theater, there was this unwritten rule that it was okay, almost expected, for the coach or the director to have temperamental outbursts. One may be able to get away with such behavior in sports and in theater, but I would not recommend it for marriages or for friendships. Not only is it not good for relationships, in a country where guns are so prevalent, not being able to control one's anger can be fatal. 5 years ago, in a Florida movie theater, a man told another man in the theater to stop using his cell phone. The two men got into an argument, and it escalated, and then the man with the cell phone took a box of popcorn and threw it at the other man, and the other man, who was a 71-year-old retired police officer, snapped, pulled out his gun, and shot and killed the young man. This Friday, there was a shooting at a high school football game in Alabama. 10 teenagers were injured, 5 of them in critical condition. It appears that it was the product of a beef, an argument. Unfortunately, these are not uncommon stories. They happen every day. And we all know about domestic abuse and road rage. And so being able to control one's temper and manage one's anger not only affects our marriages, our relationships, our employment opportunities, it actually can help us stay out of life-threatening situations. And this problem, of course, is not new. As we witness today, the Bible is filled with passages warning us about anger and how dangerous and unhealthy it can be. A hot-tempered person stirs up a conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. A fool gives full vent to anger, but the wise quietly holds it back. These words, and many more like them in the Bible, were written thousands of years ago. This has been an issue people have struggled with since the beginning of time. But becoming angry is not the problem. Everyone gets angry. The key is, how do we deal with our anger? And the important first step when we are angry is to admit that we are angry, which is easier said than done, especially for Christians. We're not supposed to get angry, right? But if we don't recognize our anger and we suppress it, it often reappears in unhealthy ways. Anger works like a poison when it gets into your system and is allowed to stay there. The first step is to acknowledge it, admit it, and then go on to identify what it's all about. Now, as you know, all anger is not bad. There is good, justifiable anger. Jesus got very upset, angry, overturned the tables of the moneylenders in the temple and threw them out. He often got angry at religious leaders when he felt they weren't being compassionate. Hypocrites, he'd call them, blind fools, blind guides. He got very angry. He would sometimes get onto his friends, his very own disciples, when they would not use faith or when they disappointed him. Where is your faith, he'd say. What were you thinking? Sometimes he kind of sounded like one of my football coaches or theater directors, especially that one named Bill A. who comes to Asbury during God on Broadway. Good anger is justifiable, as we see in organizations like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and Moms Demand Action for common sense gun laws. Good anger can serve as an important tool for healthy and constructive change in individual lives and in society. Bad anger, however, is destructive. Bad anger is bad. Sometimes we use it to destroy others, and sometimes we often harm ourselves with it. And so how do we deal with bad anger? Going to a therapist, seeing a trained psychologist is a really good tool to help us manage our anger. The therapeutic process can help us identify our anger and discover why we're angry, which is so important to understand. It can also help us find methods to help us deal with our anger, like meditation, mindfulness, exercise, learning to express our feelings, learning to breathe, taking deep breaths. I also encourage you to identify role models, people you know who are good at dealing with their anger, people you can learn from. Sherry's father, my father-in-law, Thurman Butcher, was one such role model for me. He was the most even-keeled person I have ever seen. Not until his last few years, when dementia stripped him of his regular personality, did I ever see Thurman upset. I was especially impressed with his demeanor whenever something went wrong. And instead of getting upset or angry, he would automatically focus on solving the problem, as if it was the most natural thing in the world to do, and for him it was. Instead of spending energy getting upset or being regretful or angry, he spent it solving the problem, as if life was just one big puzzle to solve. And so one thing I try to do, though it does not come naturally for me as it did for Thurman, is to focus on the opportunity to solve or fix something instead of getting angry about it, but to be in the process. Another role model for me was a man named John Suchower. Many years ago, my sister Wendy was a voice major at Armstrong. She was in several theatrical productions, and she would often talk about the director of the shows, a Dr. Suchower. Dr. Suchower taught at Armstrong from 1969 to 1992. Wendy raved at how gifted he was as a director, but also how even-tempered he was, how kind he was. He never yelled or got angry with them. An even-tempered theater director? Impossible, an oxymoron. I didn't know the man, but I secretly judged Dr. Suchower as not being a very good theater director. How could a real director not get upset? He must be kind of soft, not demanding very much from the performers, putting on mediocre productions. He's a nice guy just trying to get something up on a stage at a local college. The quality of the productions must not be very important to him. A number of years later, Armstrong was producing a musical that I loved. I would soon be graduating from Valdosta State College and would be heading to New York to pursue theater. The show Armstrong was going to do had a perfect role for me, and it was currently playing in New York off-Broadway. So I transferred from Valdosta for 1 quarter to Armstrong so I could do that role and do that show so I could get it on my resume before I headed to New York. I would finally be working with the soft director who probably didn't know very much about theater, but that was okay. It was only one show, 1 quarter. Boy, was I surprised. I couldn't have been more wrong about Dr. Suchower. He blew me away with his knowledge, his skill, and his theatrical intuition. He was a masterful director, and he was demanding, but he did it in a way that did not put you down. He indeed got frustrated at times, but he was able to harness his anger in a remarkable way so you never experienced his wrath. I've never seen anyone be able to do this the way he could do it, especially a theatrical director. When he retired, I thought he moved out of the state, but this past April, I saw his obituary in the paper, and he had only moved to Richmond Hill. I would have loved to have sat down with him and asked him questions, not questions about theater, but questions about his temperament. How did you do it, I would ask. How did you always keep your cool? How did you never intimidate or hurt anyone? I'm not sure what his answer would have been, but my sister reminded me about something Dr. Suchower did whenever it looked like he was getting frustrated. This is what would happen. You, the actor, knew you were not quite getting it, and that Dr. Suchower was getting more and more frustrated, either with you or quite possibly with himself for not being able to get across to you what he wanted. Just as you think he might burst, he would put one hand on the back of his head, look down, and spin around on the heel of his foot. After this full circle spin, he'd raise his head, look right at you, and with a smiling, peaceful, accepting calmness, he helped you, gently helped you. Right? 9 times out of 10, he'd be able to connect with you, and then you got what he wanted you to get. It was quite an interesting technique. He was able to do something physical to remind him to put things into perspective. With his Suchower spin, he was able to put a positive spin on the situation. Some synonyms for the word spin are turn, twirl, swirl, and pivot. This was a very biblical maneuver. Jesus, John the Baptist, the Hebrew prophets were often telling people to do what? Repent. Which means what? To turn around, to pivot, go in the opposite direction. Instead of going toward bursting, go towards compassion. Was the Suchower spin a reminder for Dr. Suchower to repent, to go in a different direction than the one of anger and destruction, and move to something positive, helping him to remember that we get better results by building people up than by putting them down? I don't know. But whatever it was for him, the Suchower spin worked time and time and time again. When you are about to burst, are you able to spin? Are you able to pivot? Are you able to do something to help you put things into perspective? When you are frustrated and angry, pivot, turn, put a positive spin on it. If you do, the scriptures tell us that we will have better, more fulfilling lives. In 1994, after his retirement, Dr. Suchower was honored at Armstrong. Carmel Garvin Hearn, who is the daughter of Mary Alice Garvin and the mother of Alex Hearn Swanger, was one of Dr. Suchower's students back when my sister was there and when Danny Beam was there and some others of you. For this event, Carmel put new words to the song Happiness from the show You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and sang it for him at this event. Happiness is being at Armstrong in Jenkins Hall on opening night. Happiness is sawing the lumber, painting the scenery, running the lights. Happiness was being with you every night back then, and happiness is coming here again. Happiness brings us here this evening, and we are right on cue, for happiness is being in anything at all, directed by you. The Suchower Spin. Give it a try. It will bring happiness.